Hi, welcome to the Mind Body Reset Gym. I'm so glad you're here today. We have a really interesting thing to consider: what food addiction and substance addiction have in common. The reason that I wanted to talk about this is because if we understand the commonalities, we can make decisions based on that will help us stay on our plan and help us stay healthier. So researchers are finding a link between food addiction and other substance addictions. Down in the red, it talks about commonalities between the two addictions include, but are not limited to, dopamine neurocircuitry, in other words, the way the dopamine reacts to the brain, the microbiomes that live in our gut, childhood adversity experiences, and attachment insecurity. Those are the four that we're going to consider because they're the ones in the study that really popped out at the researchers. And if we understand them and we can make plans to alleviate the distress of those, then we're in great shape when it comes to addiction. I want to start with adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs. This is a list of 10 possible things that happen to children in childhood, and you get 1 point for each one that has happened to you. You total up your points, and anything 4 or above, you become risky. Remember that each of these experiences carries trauma with it, and there's a huge link between trauma and addiction. So whether it's food addiction or whether it's a drug or alcohol addiction, there's a huge correlation between higher scores on this particular evaluative document and addiction. The second thing we want to look at is attachment. And we've talked about attachment several times because it really is at the heart of food issues. Basic types of attachment are secure, and that's when your plug plugs into your caregiver's outlet and their plug plugs into your outlet. You've got a two-way attachment and connection. And that feels really good, feels really secure. So it's called a secure attachment. And interestingly enough, secure attachment provides dopamine to the caregiver as well as to the child. So it becomes a really important thing that happens early in life, and we find out we like dopamine at that point. And then when our caregiver unplugs their plug, or we unplug their plug from our outlet and we put baby covers over it, we've moved into avoidant attachment. And that's where attachment is not safe or it's not available, and we don't tend to want to attach and connect. And then the other one that we're going to talk about today is when you get to attach sometimes, but you can't attach all the time. It's not consistent. The rules don't seem consistent. And so we sort of hover over our caregiver hoping to attach to them. And then this carries on in adult relationships, both the avoiding and the hovering, the worrying and trying to have a connection. When our attachments become disrupted at some point in our lives, we feel vulnerable and we start disconnecting from relationships because they're not pleasant anymore. In order to protect ourselves, they no longer produce dopamine. We don't feel good in them. And so we turn to food for our attachment, and it becomes our friend, our nurturer, our best friend. So let's talk about this feel-good neurocircuitry. Gabor Mate, who is an author and expert in addiction, said that stimulant-type drugs like cocaine, crystal meth, and heroin really increase the amount of dopamine the brain produces, and that rush offers that feel-good sense of relief and release, at least at the beginning of the addiction. They stimulate dopamine in the brain, mimicking feelings of attachment and connection that we loved as a child. And so it just feels good. It feels like something we just want to keep doing. Throughout life, human beings are biologically driven to be connected, seeking companionship and belonging. When opiates replace this natural tension release, need satisfaction cycle of wanting to attach, that process gets disrupted or displaced. And so the addicted person gets artificial substitution for attachment that they should have gotten in childhood from their parent. Children who haven't received this sensitive parenting are at greater risk for going to chemical substitutions, or we'll say food, even later in life. And so this is where it starts to trickle down to us. When we don't get that attachment, then we go to the food for the attachment. Food gives us that rush. It gives us that feel-good sense of relief and release, produces dopamine, and it replaces the natural tension release, need satisfaction cycle that occurs when we attach to a person. So let's look at the microbiome next. Findings in animals and humans support that our gut is full of bacteria, and they call the bacteria our microbiome. And that microbiome regulates brain function, mood, behavior, neural circuits, and the neural circuits are affected by addiction. And it's really important that we keep our microbiome as clean and pure as we can. And ironically, the process of weight loss surgery kind of resets it. And so when we have that, it's important to kind of keep it as new and shiny and bright as we can. And if we do that, then it really helps in changing behaviors, which is weird. Who would have thought that behaviors and good mental health originate in the gut? A lot of them really do. So substance use influences the gut biome, and it suggests significant gut-brain interacting when we're addicted to drugs. And because of the addiction cycle, also probably food. At least that's what they found in this study. So the conclusion is this. When we have any of those four things, they're often connected to trauma. Until that trauma has been resolved, it really becomes difficult to live without substance of some kind, whether it's food, drugs, alcohol, shopping, gambling, sex, whatever that thing is. Until we've resolved the trauma, it becomes difficult to go through life without it. And I love this conclusion. Those aren't my words, but I think it's really well written. Basically, they're saying that you cannot really give up the addiction until you've resolved the reasons that you got addicted. Those reasons are often mostly the underlying trauma. I'm going to just end with these words. Those who are trauma victims and use drugs or alcohol, we can say food here, do so not because it's fun or because it makes them happy. They use substances to find short-lived solace from an internal experience that's unbearable. Now, not all of us have been so traumatized that that fits really perfectly, but realizing that even on a less grand basis, sometimes we'll eat that food, we'll sneak it in when we're feeling stressed, feeling misunderstood, we're feeling tired, we're feeling anything in that blasted cycle. If we've had a lot of trauma, you want to make sure you get some good trauma work done with a good trauma specialist, and that will go a very far way in relieving your need to use food. So the reflection workout for today. Look at the adverse childhood experiences chart and look at your score. If it's a 4 or over, you might be at risk for some of the addictive behaviors that we mentioned in the workout. If it's a 3 or under, be grateful you had a good enough childhood to avoid the major trauma traps, and that's really cool. Trauma still could have occurred either later on in life, and that happens, or at an impressionable time. Sometimes trauma is the result of a one-time experience had at an impressionable age. If that's the case, do you relate to some of the information in the workout? And if you do, either because you have a score 4 or over, or if you've had that one really hard experience, awareness is the first step. And notice if you get triggered, and then have a plan if you get triggered. Never notice a trigger without writing a plan for it. And that's what this part is about. It's just taking control of those 4 areas of our life, realizing that bariatric surgery is a gift to reset the gut microbiome. And we want to keep it reset because it really does affect our brain and our mood and a lot of other things. So go and write, go and evaluate and figure yourselves out. And along with that, notice every day, how strongly do I believe I can be successful? How motivated am I to be successful? And keep those numbers 6 to 10. Very important to do that. Notice your resources and notice your challenges and have a plan for those challenges. So until next time, happy workout, practice, and we'll see you next time.